Today we are going to talk about a boy who reincarnated more than 1,000 times, remembering his past lives, and now in his last life he has all the skills he ever had and he will use them to exterminate humanity. It all starts with a boy with eyes wounded in the middle of a war, remembering a woman in his memory telling him not to look at anything while he was with someone, and that person seemed to be very special to him, but he is interrupted by war tanks pointed in his direction ready to attack when we found out that he slaughtered an army single-handedly that was after him, and it was like the entire army of the country was behind him shooting the kid in every possible way as he seems to activate some special power that gave him super strength, causing a huge earthquake around stepping his feet on the ground, knocked and blew up everyone who was trying to kill him. And before that continued, we found out more about in his story, starting a monologue that was running through everyone asking what would be the best way to describe him, who always reincarnated into different species of animals or living beings, being born and dying several times while having memory of all the lives he lived, until he in a lifetime of elegant speech he was killed once again by a human being who are the only beings he hates because they kill for fun or for home and not out of necessity, changing his methods constantly. And every time he was close to death he had the same questions: what kind of creature am I going to be this time, because I have this ability to be reincarnated, and when will all this finally end? Saying he didn't want to be reborn again, but it was no use, he kept being reborn, feeling great pain, but from his experiences the more chances of being an animal at the top of the food chain. And as soon as he opened his eyes, even if when a baby recognized that in this life he was one of the only beings he hated, a human being. The name of the protagonist was Lydia, in a child who for the first time had a name, saying that human life was complicated, that humans were divided into races and countries, even though he's the same species, with all things having a meaning and name. And his mother was getting worried about him because he didn't talk and didn't react at all since he was born, even without any medical problem, but they started to consider it a psychological problem. But his mother, who was called Elgiu, thought that the doctor was crazy and sending her son to a hospital full of crazy people, but it was only because she was dumb and stupid. According to the boy, she lost her father and her husband in the war, but she still had her son to take care of, and she did everything, including selling vegetables at a market to support them both. And at night she always said "I love you" to her son, remembering that if he grows up or coming good things would grow better, and said that all the time, even without getting any response or reaction from the boy, who didn't even understand what she was talking about because all other lives were animals or plants. But he also didn't hate that warm feeling when hearing the words from his mother. But in this life he had something different. Besides remembering all his other lives, he also had the skills from the other lives, and in the middle of that he met some bad people who were trying to kill a man who ran away from them while he watched from the top of a pole, wanting to use humans as a test for this new power of his, jumping from up there using the skills of a frog and advancing like a cheetah towards them and hitting a punch with the strength of a prehistoric dinosaur, like if he was a special superhuman, killing that man with just one blow, trying out all his newest powers. But deep down, even without for reason, he was sure that this was his last life and he could finally die with a smile on his face, seeing the desperation of the human behind him. And while everyone was scared of him, of the kind of monster he could be, one of the men advanced and punched them, making him realize that if he doesn't manifest any power he remains just a human like everyone else. But when he was going to receive more punches from that same guy, he activated the turtle skill that made his skin become hard like that of an animal, breaking his hand of the man and then choking him with the strength of a chimpanzee using only one hand, saying that as long as he can manifest he can be anything he once was. But before he could punch and finish the man, one of those watching shot him in the middle of his belly, and because nothing was activated it crossed perfectly that after being abandoned in the middle of the street with another man who fainted, he realized it was a weapon that killed him in other lives, and it was hurting too much, but he would not die there, using his sea cucumber skill to spit the bullet and close his belly wound, surviving because of an animal instinct that was inside him. But for him it didn't make sense that such a small body had such great power, and from afar he hears his desperate mother calling his name, but he ignored it and kept walking to the other side, thinking he could hunt and he didn't need her around anymore. But somehow he still missed those words she said every night and made him feel good. But he still left his mother alone for 4 days straight, while he was no longer able to survive alone, full of pain in his stomach because of the food he ate, that it was not for humans, eating various poisonous animals or not, making him sick, thinking that the time for his death had come. This happened by chance. His mother found him lying in the middle of the forest, running to hug him after so much time apart. While the protagonist was hungry and wanted food, his mother made him, and how he couldn't make her stop crying, instead said those words, human beings, that he couldn't understand, saying that he loved his mother, the first words of his whole life. But contrary to what the day expected, she did was cry even more with happiness, making him notice that the sunset that day was especially beautiful. and he decided to stay that way a little longer until he becomes independent. Will try to live a human life, but what he did that day ended up getting back to some dangerous people, while that man from before kept talking that he killed Monster Boy to save the detective, but no one believed that common guy. Even the man who was going to die lied to hide all that secret with himself, thinking that it would be a better way. And after that day, Yugal always held Dudley's hand to make sure he wouldn't go further away from her. And he didn't hate that hand he had with a smile, but he also knew that it could become a problem, and so did his mother. It was just cool with him being aggressive and dramatic with everyone else who did something to his son and talked bad about him or herself, creating a huge scene about her dying because of a place she sold in the market, since before her son was born was as if she was constantly fighting everyone else. And as time went by, he got used to his human life, picking flowers together with his mother, and every time he thought about leaving he held her warm and hard hand and stayed by his side, asking why she is always fighting, saying that the reason was that she was doing it to protect her son. When a strong wind came which made the flowers she picked fly away and around, at the same time it made the protagonist want to stay closer to Yashio longer and not leave. Again, that was until that man that Jane almost killed met the little monster of that day, and soon after we hear about survival of the fittest, the weakest become food of the strongest. This is a law that applies to all existing beings, but there are some deaths that you can't understand, all caused by humans dying to turn into clothes. Evolution of science, decoration for humans or even for fun, and that's why Jamie hated humans. Until 12 years passed since the day the protagonist was born, and he was finally used to human life. But things were changing a lot, with bigger buildings and wide streets and a big factory that appeared near the river where they lived that spilled pollution in there every second, and his mother sick after having eaten something contaminated from Rio that Jair recognized that it would feel bad by instinct, and didn't eat for a day and ended up having to take care of his sick mother in bed. And the protagonist had to go to school and soon after take his mother's place to sell food in the market, thinking that humans caused pain to his own benefit. But he didn't want Elju to be that person in pain until someone appeared wanting to buy one of his apples. But the truth is that society had several laws and limits that should not be exceeded, making the detective appear in front of him once again, saying who didn't show up earlier because he wanted to see how a monster lives. And why was he still pretending to be a normal human? But he was silent without answering anything until he let himself be arrested by the men who were there, saying he was being investigated for espionage, and that if he is a spy, his mother must also be one, and that he has already sent other men to fetch her too, despite the condition she was in. Well, and probably would not withstand the investigation in that state, which made the protagonist angry with that man, then activating another of his skills to break chains and all the ground that was around him, leaving everyone surprised as he ran at high speed away, calling the boy a monster. But the truth is he was being underestimated, because the boy could become anything he wanted to be, and that day he became a calamity. And the next thing you know is the much older protagonist walking alone in the middle of the city trying to hide, and that the only reason why humans are the center of the world, even with a weak base, is their language. That allowed humans to build civilizations much faster than any other species, and the protagonist also learned the language of them, mainly of his mother who had left, and he is left wondering if this power of his is a blessing or a bad one. And we will be able to find out how this all really happened, starting from the moment that James was running home to prevent his mother from being taken unfairly by the police by concentrating all the strength in his legs to jump huge distances and get even faster, to where determined to save her. And we see the side of one of the police officers who was with that detective who sent everyone he could after the monster. And that man tried to stop them from taking a boy, and the reason for that was that he was afraid of the boy. And in the James house, the police got there faster than the boy and was about to take his mother away, but he arrives flying from the other side and appears right behind them, saying that it was a child who lived there in that house, making them believe that they had committed a crime mistake and they were in the wrong house, just the same way they would follow orders and take the boy for spy investigation. But before that happens, the mother opens the door, dragging herself through the disease, asking what was going on when he saw his son outside, and she, seeing that he was in trouble, started calling everyone in the neighborhood, saying that they wanted to kidnap her son, trying to call for help, but it was only making things worse, things even more to their side. And the last straw for the protagonist was seeing one of them punching Elxiu in the face, making him feel something he didn't know what it was, resembling a shiver that provoked his anger, and like that he lost all his sanity, attacking and killing all the men who were there. at once in a brutal way. Unfortunately, at the same time made his mother cry once again because of him. That was until that detective arrived once again with several policemen talking that the boy was a real monster that killed all those men, and before Jamie did something to them his mother ran in front of him. Even though she was sick, she said that it was her fault and she was the one who killed all those men, giving herself up in the place of her son who had done nothing. That made her remember the reason why she fight so hard, it was to protect him. And seeing this scene he cried for the first time like a normal child. If you want part 2, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Thanks for watching.